1909. The stench of slaughter filled the air south of Archer Avenue. Steam rose from the Union stockyards, 475 acres of noise, muscle, and money. Men in blood-stained aprons hauled carcasses through rivers of waste, and among them, another kind of butcher was learning his trade, the kind who dealt not in cattle but in fear. Chicago was a city bursting at the seams. Immigrants from Sicily, Ireland, and Poland crowded into tenements near Halsted Street. They brought their languages, their loyalties, and their grudges. In the maze of alleys and saloons, justice didn't come from a courthouse. It came from whoever had the most friends, or the biggest gun. They called it the Black Hand. Letters arrived in mailboxes written in shaky Italian script. "Pay $500, one would read, or your child will be kidnapped. Pay $1,000, another said, or your shop will burn." The signature at the bottom was always the same, a crudely drawn black handprint. It was the Mafia's earliest American form, fragmented, chaotic, ruled by terror rather than order. Yet from this chaos, something far more powerful was about to be born. In the Levee District, Chicago's red light kingdom, politics and crime already danced hand in hand. Brothels, gambling halls, and saloons operated openly under the protection of aldermen and police captains. The city's power brokers, like the infamous Bathhouse John Coughlin and Hinky Dink Kenna, ran the first ward like a fiefdom. They didn't care who broke the law, as long as they got their cut. Then, in 1909, a quiet Sicilian named Giovanni "Johnny" Torrio arrived from Brooklyn. He wasn't like the others. Torrio didn't believe in chaos. He believed in structure. Where others saw rackets, he saw a system waiting to be organized, like a corporation of vice. Torrio had learned under the great Paul Kelly of the Five Points Gang in New York. Kelly taught that crime wasn't about brutality, it was about control. And in Chicago, Torrio saw a city wide open for business. He began by taking over a few gambling dens near Wabash Avenue, partnering with his aunt, Victoria Moresco, who ran one of the city's most profitable brothels. Torrio brought order, discipline, and a simple rule: violence only when necessary, and never without profit. But even Torrio couldn't ignore the blood that constantly soaked the streets. The Black Hand still preyed on Italian immigrants. Gunmen ambushed shopkeepers. Explosions ripped through storefronts. The police barely investigated, sometimes because they were paid not to. It was here, amid the blood and smoke, that Torrio's legend began. In 1910, a brash young hood named Big Jim Colosimo ruled the South Side's vice empire. Colosimo was flashy, silk suits, diamond rings, and a taste for the spotlight. He ran brothels by the dozen and paid off politicians like they were bartenders. But his empire had a weakness. His enemies didn't fear him anymore. So Colosimo called on his old friend Torrio from New York. He wanted muscle. He got something more, a strategist. Torrio reorganized Colosimo's rackets, consolidated his protection network, and cut deals with corrupt lawmen. Slowly, he began phasing out the reckless enforcers and bringing in professionals, men who followed orders. And one of those men would soon change American history. In 1919, Torrio received word from Brooklyn. A young enforcer named Alphonse Capone had gotten into trouble for assaulting a rival and needed a place to disappear. Torrio didn't hesitate. "Send him to Chicago," he said. That decision, quiet, almost routine, would reshape the underworld forever. But before Capone's arrival, Torrio had one more lesson to teach Chicago: that crime could be run like a business, with books, ledgers, and investments. He paid off cops, aldermen, even priests. He placed his own men inside the unions and kept every deal recorded. He turned corruption into efficiency. And he knew that something massive was coming, something that would make all this small-time vice look like pocket change. That storm was Prohibition. But before the dry years, Chicago was still a city in transition, an industrial jungle ruled by railroads and meatpackers. On the South Side, workers toiled in brutal shifts. On payday, they poured into the taverns, desperate for escape. The saloon keepers, bookies, and prostitutes gave them that, for a price. Torrio understood something few others did. Sin could be monetized better than virtue. By 1918, Torrio had become Colosimo's right hand, the man who balanced the ledgers while others spilled the blood. Yet his patience was running thin. Colosimo was content to stay in brothels. Torrio wanted to expand into bootlegging, narcotics, and unions. The world was about to change, and Torrio intended to change with it. Then, in May 1920, the impossible happened. Big Jim Colosimo was found dead in his restaurant's foyer, a single bullet through his heart. The hit was surgical, professional, and no one was ever convicted. But everyone in Chicago whispered the same name, Torrio. The throne was empty. Torrio took it without hesitation. He inherited Colosimo's empire, the brothels, the gambling dens, the connections, and quietly began building a new kind of underworld, disciplined, hierarchical, and more dangerous than anything the city had seen. And when Al Capone arrived, fresh off the train from Brooklyn, Torrio saw in him the future. Raw muscle, charm, and ruthlessness combined. Capone started small, managing the Four Deuces nightclub on South Wabash. But Torrio knew, this kid was no bartender. He was a general waiting for his war. That war was coming. The Volstead Act would soon outlaw liquor across America, turning whiskey into gold and gangsters into kings. Chicago, loud, corrupt, explosive, was about to become the Mafia's capital of capitalism. And when the first barrels of bootleg beer rolled out of Torrio's warehouses, the city would never be the same again. Because in the stockyards of Chicago, amid the blood and steam, a new kind of empire had been born. One that killed quietly, bribed efficiently, and lasted for generations. May 1920, Chicago had just buried Big Jim Colosimo. No tears, no prayers, just whispers. The city knew his death meant more than the fall of a kingpin. It meant the beginning of a new order. Johnny Torrio now ruled the South Side, and unlike his flamboyant predecessor, he preferred silence to spectacle. Where Colosimo wore diamonds, Torrio wore a gray suit. Where Colosimo boasted, Torrio smiled. And while the police searched for clues, Torrio was already expanding his reach, methodically, invisibly, and profitably. He called it the outfit, not a gang, not a family, a business. It had departments, managers, and accounts, and its product wasn't meat or steel or labor. It was vice, distilled, organized, and sold to the highest bidder. Torrio's headquarters sat behind a respectable storefront on Wabash Avenue. There, ledgers recorded every cent that flowed through Chicago's brothels, gambling halls, and rackets. The police had their cut, the aldermen had theirs, and Torrio had everyone else's. But he wasn't greedy for cash. He was greedy for order. He saw Chicago as a chessboard of power, North Side Irish gangs, South Side Italians, and dozens of independents fighting for territory. Torrio wanted to unify them, to make the chaos efficient. "There's enough for everybody," he often said. "If we cooperate, we can all get rich." Then came Prohibition. January 17, 1920, the Volstead Act took effect. America went dry, bars shuttered, breweries closed. But the thirst didn't die. It just went underground, and Torrio was waiting. Liquor became the gold rush of organized crime. A bottle that once cost 50 cents could now sell for $10. In a single year, a successful bootleg outfit could earn more than a small bank. Torrio didn't just see profit. He saw infrastructure. He partnered with breweries in Canada and distilleries in Peoria, setting up smuggling routes through Lake Michigan. Trucks disguised as milk wagons carried barrels under false floors. Federal agents were bribed. Patrol boats paid off. Chicago became a river of illegal liquor, flowing quietly through warehouses and speakeasies. And at the heart of it all, Torrio's lieutenant, Al Capone. Capone had matured from a street brawler into a businessman, though his charm masked a ruthless streak. He ran the Four Deuces on South Wabash, part nightclub, part office, part fortress. Politicians came for bribes, cops came for envelopes, and everyone else came for whiskey. Capone kept the books, handled the staff, and, when necessary, handled enemies. He learned quickly under Torrio. Discipline first, money second, violence only when required. But Chicago wasn't built for peace. Other gangs wanted their share, particularly the North Side Gang, led by Dean O'Banion, a sharp Irish florist with a quick smile and a quicker trigger. O'Banion's men hijacked beer trucks, robbed warehouses, and muscled in on Torrio's distribution lines. Torrio tried diplomacy. O'Banion laughed. So Torrio sent Capone to negotiate. The meeting took place at Schofield's flower shop, O'Banion's legitimate front. Surrounded by roses, Capone made a simple offer: territory division, profit sharing, and peace. O'Banion agreed, for now. But behind the petals and perfume, war was already brewing. Meanwhile, Torrio's empire grew unstoppable. He controlled the city's vice districts from Cicero to Bridgeport, each operation protected by politicians and police. Voters were bribed by the thousands. Elections were rigged. Torrio understood that true power didn't come from bullets. It came from ballots. By 1923, he moved operations west, into the suburb of Cicero, a place where city cops had no jurisdiction and corruption was even easier to buy. Torrio financed gambling halls, speakeasies, and brothels under the guise of entertainment clubs. Capone handled the enforcement using intimidation to drive out competition. When reformers tried to shut them down, they found their cars vandalized, their homes burned, or their offices sprayed with bullets. One newspaper later wrote, "Cicero isn't a suburb, it's a kingdom." But power breeds enemies. Dean O'Banion struck back, hijacking another one of Torrio's beer shipments. Furious, Torrio agreed to buy out O'Banion's share of a brewery to restore peace. When Torrio arrived to close the deal, O'Banion had arranged for the police to raid it, catching Torrio red-handed. It was humiliation, public and deliberate. Torrio never forgot. On November 10, 1924, 3 men entered Schofield's flower shop. One shook O'Banion's hand. "Hello, Dean." Then they opened fire. O'Banion fell among his bouquets, the first casualty in what would become known as Chicago's beer wars. The hit sent shockwaves through the city. Torrio denied involvement, but everyone knew the truth. The North Side vowed revenge. Within weeks, gunfire echoed through Cicero and the Loop. Drive-by shootings became routine. Chicago newspapers called it gangland terrorism. Then, in January 1925, Torrio's empire nearly ended. As Torrio returned to his apartment from a shopping trip, O'Banion's men struck back. A hail of bullets shattered the air. Torrio collapsed, riddled with wounds. Capone rushed him to safety, saving his life, barely. In the hospital, Torrio made a decision. He had survived Brooklyn, survived Colosimo, survived wars and assassinations. But he knew the next bullet would not miss. When he recovered, he summoned Capone. "It's your turn now, Al," he said softly. "You run it." Then he left Chicago and never came back. Torrio retired quietly to Italy, then to Brooklyn, living out his days as the quiet man who built the blueprint for modern organized crime. But his creation, the outfit, was now in the hands of a man who didn't believe in restraint. Under Torrio, Chicago's underworld had been a business. Under Capone, it would become a kingdom of blood. And as Torrio's train left Union Station, he looked out the window one last time at the smoky skyline of the city he had conquered. He'd built an empire from vice, discipline, and silence. Now, he left it to chaos and to Capone. Because in Chicago, power didn't die. It only changed hands. January 1925. A gray haze hung over Chicago's South Side as Al Capone stepped out of Johnny Torrio's shadow and into history. Torrio had fled, wounded and weary, but Capone, only 26 years old, was just getting started. He looked around at the empire he had inherited: 10,000 speakeasies, a dozen breweries, hundreds of brothels, and more police officers on his payroll than the city itself could count. Torrio had called it the outfit. Capone would make it a kingdom. He ruled from the Lexington Hotel, a fortress of limestone and brass on Michigan Avenue. The lobby bustled with politicians, reporters, and bodyguards. Everyone wanted a moment with the man the papers dubbed Scarface. Capone hated the nickname, but he loved the attention. By day he played the philanthropist, handing out turkeys at Christmas, funding soup kitchens during the Depression, smiling for photographers. By night, his men terrorized the city, ensuring every drop of beer, whiskey, and gin flowed through Capone's network. Cicero was now his capital. From there, trucks rolled nightly, headlights off, bound for bars and secret warehouses. Capone's bookkeepers kept meticulous ledgers, deliveries, payoffs, profits. An entire economy had risen from a law meant to stop drinking. But power never stands uncontested. The North Side Gang, now led by Jaime Weiss and George Bugs Moran, vowed revenge for Dean O'Banion's murder. They struck first, ambushing Capone's car outside the Hawthorne Hotel. Bullets shattered the windows, tore through the seats, and left the lobby riddled with holes. Capone escaped unharmed, but the message was clear. The war was far from over. For months, Chicago became a battlefield. Assassins lurked at street corners. Cars roared down alleys, machine guns blazing. Each dawn brought new bodies to the morgue. Each night, new headlines. "Gangland slaughter," screamed the Tribune. Capone's response was precision and patience. He bought loyalty with envelopes and eliminated betrayal with bullets. He kept judges on retainer and aldermen on call. Even Mayor William Hale Thompson, flamboyant and corrupt, was rumored to have taken Capone's money. "Chicago is my town," Capone once said. And he was right. But beneath the suits and silk ties, paranoia festered. Capone rarely traveled without a convoy. He slept in different rooms each night, armed guards outside every door. The price of power was fear. Then came the moment that would immortalize him. February 14th, 1929. A cold morning on North Clark Street, a garage belonging to Bugs Moran's gang. 7 men waited for a liquor shipment. At 10:30 a.m., a police car pulled up. 4 men stepped out, 2 in uniforms, 2 in plain clothes. The officers ordered the gangsters to line up against the wall. Seconds later, the roar of Tommy guns shattered the air. When the shooting stopped, 7 bodies lay in blood and brick dust, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. No one could prove Capone ordered it. He was in Florida that week, but everyone knew who had the motive. Chicago was horrified. The press called it the day gangland slaughtered itself. Capone's empire was at its height, but his image, once almost heroic, was now stained beyond repair. Yet the murders didn't end his reign. Business thrived. Capone's men diversified: gambling, horse racing, extortion. Even Hollywood came calling. Reporters shadowed him. Photographers begged for a smile. He understood publicity better than any politician. In public, Capone played the gentleman. "I give the people what they want," he said. "If I didn't, someone else would." In private, he ruled with mathematical brutality. A suspected traitor disappeared. An uncooperative saloon burned overnight. His enemies either joined him or vanished into the river. Still, Capone wasn't reckless. He was calculated. He recruited accountants and lawyers, turning vice into enterprise. He even formed a board of directors among top gang leaders to mediate disputes. For a time, murder declined. Profits soared. But power attracts attention, and Washington had begun to notice. Federal prohibition agents like Elliot Ness arrived in Chicago with one mission: bring down Capone. Ness built a hand-picked squad, the Untouchables, men who couldn't be bought, bribed, or intimidated. They raided breweries, hijacked trucks, and froze millions in assets. Capone laughed, but the noose was tightening, because it wasn't bullets that would destroy him. It was numbers. In 1927, the Supreme Court ruled that illegal income was still taxable. Suddenly, Capone's lavish spending, his mansions, cars, jewelry, became evidence. Treasury agent Frank Wilson traced every payment, every check, every shell company. Capone's empire, built on intimidation, was undone by arithmetic. October 17th, 1931. Capone stood in a federal courtroom, smirking as the verdict was read. Guilty on 5 counts of tax evasion, 11 years in prison. The crowd erupted. Capone tried to grin, but for the first time the king of Chicago looked small. He served time in Atlanta, then Alcatraz. The syphilis he'd contracted years earlier began eroding his mind. By 1939, he was released, broken, confused, a shadow of the man who had once owned the city. When he returned to his Florida estate, reporters asked if he missed Chicago. Capone stared blankly. "I paid for every crime I ever committed," he muttered. "And a few I didn't." He died in 1947, surrounded by family, his empire long dissolved. But the outfit didn't die with him. His lieutenants, Frank Nitti, Tony Accardo, Paul Ricca, quietly restructured the organization, moving from blood to business. They learned from Capone's mistakes. No more parades, no more headlines. Power would be hidden, silent, untouchable. Capone had ruled through fear. His successors ruled through invisibility. And so, long after his fall, the outfit continued to shape Chicago from the shadows, controlling unions, infiltrating City Hall, laundering money through casinos and construction contracts. The face changed, the system endured. Because Torrio built the foundation, Capone expanded it, and those who followed perfected it. In the end, Al Capone didn't just take over Chicago, he taught the underworld how to survive it. October 1931. When the prison gates clanged shut behind Al Capone, Chicago's underworld held its breath. The throne was empty, the crown blood-stained, but power, like money, never vanishes, it simply moves. From the marble corridors of City Hall to the smoke-filled back rooms of Cicero, a quiet conversation began. Who runs the outfit now? The answer arrived not with gunfire but with a handshake. Frank Nitti, the enforcer. Capone's longtime lieutenant. Slender, sharp-eyed, allergic to attention. He had watched what fame did to Capone and swore never to repeat it. Under Nitti, the outfit went underground. Literally. Meetings shifted from hotels to basements, from nightclubs to church socials. Newspapers no longer knew the names of Chicago's gangsters, and that was exactly how Nitti wanted it. He understood what Capone never did. Public fear invites federal attention. Silence, on the other hand, breeds permanence. While the world called it the Great Depression, the outfit called it opportunity. Construction projects, trucking unions, and Hollywood studios all needed money and protection. Through a maze of shell companies and consulting firms, Nitti's men began investing in legitimate businesses. They bought laundries, restaurants, and moving companies. Every clean dollar masked a dirty one. In 1932, Nitti negotiated with New York's syndicate, Luciano, Lansky, Costello, to formalize a national network. The outfit would control the Midwest: Chicago, Milwaukee, Kansas City, St. Louis. In return, it shared profits from gambling and narcotics. For the first time, organized crime functioned like a corporation, with territories, dividends, and balance sheets. Yet danger still lurked in the form of Frank Wilson and the federal investigators who had brought Capone down. Raids intensified, indictments mounted. In 1938, cornered by pressure and illness, Nitti ended his own life with a single shot to the head. But death didn't halt the machine, it merely shifted gears. Leadership passed to Paul the waiter Ricca, a quiet immigrant from Naples who had once served coffee to Capone's guests. Ricca's genius was invisibility. He avoided flash, avoided words. His orders traveled through whispers and coded notes, never signatures. Ricca's lieutenant, Tony Accardo, nicknamed Joe Batters, handled enforcement. Unlike Capone's flamboyance, Accardo believed in long games, control through fear of disruption, not through spectacle. He restructured gambling, rationalized extortion, and built an intelligence network inside the police department itself. By 1940, Chicago's criminal empire had re-emerged, quieter but richer than ever. Prohibition was gone, yet the outfit adapted, running nightclubs, casinos, and off-track betting parlors. When World War II arrived, their black market influence expanded again. Ration coupons, stolen war goods, even naval contracts. Washington whispered about enemy infiltration. Chicago just called it business. Then came 1943, a moment few historians record, but every gangster remembered. From an apartment on Sheridan Road, Ricca and Accardo convened a secret summit. On the table lay a new frontier, Las Vegas. Meyer Lansky and Benjamin "Bugsy" Siegel proposed transforming the desert into a paradise of gambling and luxury, funded by mob loans. Ricca saw the potential immediately. Chicago would handle the skim, the invisible percentages siphoned from casino profits before the books reached Nevada regulators. It was clean, quiet, and endlessly lucrative. While Siegel built the Flamingo, the outfit sent accountants, not hitmen. They perfected the art of unseen theft. Every slot machine coin, every roulette spin, fractional cuts flowed back to Chicago through couriers and coded ledgers. By the late 1940s, the outfit's reach stretched from Cicero alleys to the neon of the Strip. And in Chicago itself, control was absolute. Election after election, aldermen won with outfit money. Police captains rotated through precincts on Ricca's approval. Trucking unions voted as Accardo ordered. Even the FBI's new director, J. Edgar Hoover, looked the other way, publicly obsessed with communists, privately reluctant to admit the Mafia existed at all. Then, in 1950, the illusion of invisibility cracked. Senator Estes Kefauver launched televised hearings on organized crime. For the first time, Americans saw senators grilling mob witnesses under the glare of cameras. Across the nation, millions watched grainy footage of men sweating under questioning, men who couldn't recall anything. When Chicago's turn came, Ricca sent lawyers, not leaders. The outfit, they said. Never heard of it. But the senators weren't fooled. The hearings exposed links between Chicago's underworld and its political establishment. Newspaper editorials screamed for reform. Ricca and Accardo responded with the calm of men untouchable. They cut visible ties, funneled investments into Florida and Cuba, and adopted a new principle: no more headlines, no more witnesses. By the mid-1950s, the outfit's profits exceeded $100 million annually, most of it untraceable. They controlled the Chicago Heights wire service that supplied horse racing results nationwide. They ran card rooms from Peoria to Phoenix. They skimmed millions from Teamsters pension funds through front companies like Transamerica and Central States Investments. To the outside world, Chicago had been cleaned up. To those who knew better, it had merely grown quieter. In 1957, Accardo attended a meeting in Appalachian, New York, a summit meant to solidify national cooperation. The police raided it, arresting dozens of mobsters. Headlines exploded. Mafia meeting smashed. For the first time, the public realized the Mafia was real, organized, and national. But in Chicago, nothing changed. The outfit had already adapted again, its leaders learning to operate from the suburbs through intermediaries behind legitimate corporate fronts. Ricca retired to a modest home in River Forest, where he tended his garden and avoided reporters. Accardo took over fully, guiding the outfit into a new era of union control, casino investments, and political manipulation. By the decade's end, Chicago's underworld had achieved what Capone never could: respectability, not in morals, but in permanence. No more drive-bys, no more massacres, just contracts, percentages, and envelopes passed in silence. From the outside, it looked like peace. In truth, it was evolution. The outfit had shed its skin. The machine Torrio built, Capone fueled, and Ricca refined now ran itself, an invisible empire built not on blood but on bureaucracy. And as the 1950s faded into the age of television and suburbs, Chicago's mob didn't vanish into history. It dissolved into the background noise of progress, hiding in plain sight within the very systems it once terrorized. Because by then, the lesson was clear. Power that shouts is temporary. Power that whispers lasts forever. By the 1960s, Chicago had changed. Highways cut through neighborhoods, skyscrapers reflected the sun off Lake Michigan, and suburbs expanded like fingers across the prairie. But beneath the surface, the city's old heart still beat in shadow. The outfit, once loud and bloody under Capone, had grown quiet, cunning, and richer than ever. Tony Joe Batters Accardo, now in his 50s, sat in a modest Cicero bungalow. Outside, children played in the streets, unaware that their playground was controlled by a network that spanned the Midwest. Accardo had long perfected the art of invisible power. Violence was rare, carefully orchestrated only when absolutely necessary. Money moved silently through unions, businesses, and banks. Threats were whispered, not broadcast. Chicago's union halls became the new battlefield. The Teamsters, under the leadership of powerful figures like Jimmy Hoffa, controlled pension funds, trucking routes, and labor contracts. The outfit saw opportunity. Through intimidation, bribery, and strategic alliances, they infiltrated these unions. Every trucking route that left the city, every construction project that rose in steel and concrete, funneled profits back to Cicero. The operation required patience and precision. Mob accountants, hidden behind legitimate front companies, managed millions of dollars. Every pay stub, every ledger, every tax document was carefully falsified. The law couldn't touch them because, to the outside world, they were just businessmen. But inside the offices, envelopes stuffed with cash moved like arteries carrying lifeblood. Meanwhile, Vegas glimmered as the new frontier. Capone's old associates, including Accardo and Paul Ricca, had quietly financed casinos from afar. The Chicago outfit skimmed millions before the casinos ever reported revenue. While the bright lights of the Strip drew tourists, Chicago's men collected fortunes unseen, untouchable. They never set foot in the casinos unless necessary. Their power traveled silently, through lawyers, accountants, and trusted intermediaries. But power isn't only measured in dollars. It's measured in influence. By the late 1960s, Chicago politicians, judges, and police captains operated in tandem with the outfit, often unaware that they were being controlled. Campaigns were funded, votes delivered, and laws bent, always subtly, always leaving no trace. The city seemed normal, orderly, and free. Yet beneath, the machinery of crime hummed like a hidden engine. The outfit also learned from history. Capone's flamboyance had brought attention. Ricca and Accardo ensured their successors avoided it. Meetings were held in private homes, not hotels. Guns were used sparingly, only when absolutely necessary to enforce contracts or silence traitors. Fear remained, but it was quiet, unseen, almost psychological. Not every venture was bloodless. In the late 1970s, enforcement teams still disappeared troublesome rivals or uncooperative businessmen. They were never seen again. Sometimes a burned-out car would appear in a lot, or a skeleton in a remote field. But these incidents were rare, surgical, reminders that the outfit still ruled by invisible laws. Throughout this period, Chicago remained the Midwest's hub. Operations extended to Milwaukee, St. Louis, and Kansas City, but Cicero was always home. The streets where Capone once roared with Thompson submachine guns were now lined with accountants, union stewards, and lawyers. The power had shifted from bullets to bureaucracy, from fear to financial leverage. The Golden Age wasn't without danger. Federal investigators began to take organized crime seriously. Wiretaps, undercover agents, and tax audits probed deeper than ever before. But the outfit's greatest weapon was invisibility. They never appeared in public. They paid off informants. They ran legitimate businesses as shields. When authorities raided one front, another quietly took its place. By the time prosecutors understood the scope, the operation had already adapted. During the 1980s, Chicago became synonymous with strategic control. Casinos, trucking, labor unions, and construction projects all fed into one massive network. Politicians leaned on the outfit to deliver votes. Businesses leaned on them to avoid disruption. Newspapers occasionally hinted at corruption, but the lines were blurred. The city's power brokers had been quietly co-opted. Even the younger generation of gangsters learned from the past. They studied the mistakes of Capone, flashy violence, attention-seeking, and the successes of Ricca and Accardo, discipline, patience, and invisibility. Chicago became a city of silent kings, ruling not through spectacle, but through influence that touched every corner of life. By the end of the decade, Chicago's golden age was not measured in headlines, but in control. The outfit's power had become a quiet certainty, a backdrop to the city itself. Streets, businesses, unions, even local government functioned with an unseen hand guiding decisions. The lesson was clear. The Mafia's true strength lay not in terror, but in endurance. Violence was a tool, yes, but true dominance required subtlety, infiltration, and patience. Chicago had survived Prohibition, gang wars, federal investigations, and public scrutiny, and the outfit had survived with it. And so, as the skyline gleamed under the Midwest sun, and traffic hummed through downtown, the city appeared ordinary, bustling, alive. Yet in Cicero, in the quiet offices behind the shops, and in the shadows of union halls and parking lots, the Chicago outfit remained as powerful as ever. They had learned to move like ghosts, everywhere and nowhere at once. By the time the 1980s drew to a close, one fact was undeniable. Chicago was still under the rule of the outfit. Bloodshed had been replaced by balance sheets, and spectacle replaced by strategy. The city had changed, but the empire endured, silent, invisible, and unbroken. Because in Chicago, power whispered, and those who listened closely knew it would never leave. By the 1980s, Chicago's streets had changed. Neon lights reflected on wet asphalt. Suburban sprawl had swallowed old neighborhoods. But the Chicago outfit, though quieter than Capone's era, still pulsed through the veins of the city. This was the empire's most dangerous period yet. Technology, law enforcement, and media scrutiny had advanced. The FBI now had sophisticated wiretaps, electronic surveillance, and databases that tracked financial activity in ways previous generations of mobsters could never imagine. Tony Accardo had long since stepped back. Paul Ricca had passed the baton, leaving a council of trusted lieutenants to run the outfit like a corporate board. They were still rich, still untouchable in many ways, but the cracks were beginning to show. Federal prosecutors targeted the outfit on multiple fronts. Organized crime units, joint task forces, and undercover operations aimed to dismantle decades of invisible control. The law now understood the rules. Follow the money, and the empire collapses. In 1986, Operation Family Secrets began to take shape. Investigators sought to tie the outfit to decades of unsolved murders, extortion schemes, and union corruption. They relied on informants who were once insiders, men who had seen the machinery of power from the inside and were now willing to talk. It was a dangerous business. Being an informant meant risking death. FBI agents ensured protection, but the fear was palpable. Witnesses disappeared, apartments were burned, threats delivered through cryptic notes or subtle messages. Yet the federal grip tightened. One tactic became decisive: wiretaps. Phones, offices, and homes were monitored. Conversations that had once been safe behind closed doors now betrayed the outfit's secrets. For the first time, authorities could link names to actions, money to murders. It was a turning point. By the late 1980s, indictments began to pile up. Top lieutenants faced charges of racketeering, loan sharking, extortion, and murder. Assets were frozen. Businesses, once fronted as legitimate, were seized or shut down. Chicago's underworld felt the squeeze. Yet the outfit's legacy was not destroyed. They adapted again, relocating operations, using shell companies, and hiding behind layers of intermediaries. Violence became rarer, replaced by intimidation and bureaucracy. The ghosts of Capone and Ricca lived on in these methods: power through patience, invisibility, and financial mastery. Public perception shifted. No longer were gangsters glamorous or feared in broad daylight. The media now called them organized crime figures, faceless and bureaucratic. But in Cicero, the control remained. Trucks still moved under the outfit's unseen hand. Union contracts, casino skims, and construction deals still funneled millions quietly. The empire had transformed. It was no longer about headlines or bullets, but about influence that could survive scrutiny. By the mid-1990s, the outfit was smaller but leaner, more efficient. The old guard, men who had survived Prohibition, Capone's wars, and the Kefauver hearings, had passed away. Their successors were careful, calculating, and deeply aware of federal scrutiny. They had learned the final lesson: visibility equals vulnerability. Still, power was preserved. The outfit remained a fixture in Chicago's political and economic landscape. Local elections, union boards, and business contracts continued to be subtly influenced. Federal investigators could shut down individual operations, but dismantling decades of invisible influence proved nearly impossible. The Chicago outfit's story offers lessons in longevity, adaptation, and the power of subtlety. Capone's reign had been explosive, Torrio's methodical, Ricca's invisible, and Accardo's strategic. By the late 20th century, the organization had survived waves of law enforcement, media scrutiny, and internal betrayal. Their empire endured because they understood the true nature of power. It must be flexible, patient, and unseen. Even as arrests and convictions reduced their manpower, the outfit's influence remained in the fabric of Chicago life. Corporate fronts, union influence, and political alliances ensured continuity. Generations learned from the mistakes of flashy predecessors and perfected the art of invisibility. In the end, the Chicago outfit was less about violence and more about control. It had evolved from Capone's roaring, gun-toting empire into a silent, structured network capable of outlasting decades of federal pressure. Chicago's skyline, once the backdrop for drive-by shootings and speakeasy bullets, now glimmered with prosperity. And while the public saw only streets, skyscrapers, and commerce, beneath it all, the city's invisible kings still ruled. Their empire was not loud. It was quiet, pervasive, and enduring, a testament to the adaptability of organized crime. The lessons of the outfit's golden age are clear. Power survives when it is patient, when it adapts, when it moves unseen. Violence and spectacle may build legends, but it is silence, strategy, and foresight that build empires. And in Chicago, the empire that began with Colosimo was expanded by Torrio, immortalized by Capone, and perfected by Ricca and Accardo, still whispers today, its influence embedded in the city's history, politics, and economy, a shadow empire that has survived the scrutiny of generations. Because in Chicago, the streets may change, governments may rise and fall, but power that whispers lasts forever.